A homeless man sat on a park bench, shivering in the cold, but when he heard a faint cry, his life changed forever. What he found that night would lead to a journey of love, sacrifice, and a miracle no one saw coming. This is the story of how one man's act of kindness turned into the greatest gift of all. But before we dive in, let us know in the comments, what would you have done in his shoes? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because tomorrow we'll bring you another heartwarming tale of hope and second chances that you won't want to miss. It was one of those nights when the cold didn't just bite, it gnawed. The kind of cold that seeped into your bones and made you wonder if the sun would ever rise again. In a small, dimly lit park on the edge of the city, Elliot Graves sat on a bench. His coat, worn thin from years of use, did little to shield him from the icy wind. He pulled it tighter around himself, his breath forming little clouds in the air. Elliot wasn't always a man who spent his nights on park benches. Once, he had a life, a family, a home filled with laughter and music. But that was before the accident, before he lost everything. Now, the bench was his bed, and the stars were his only company. Just as he was about to close his eyes and try to sleep, he heard it. A sound so faint he thought he might have imagined it. A cry. He froze, his heart pounding. Did I just hear... "A baby?" he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the wind. The cry came again, louder this time. Elliot stood, his legs stiff from the cold, and followed the sound. It led him to another bench, just a few feet away. There, wrapped in a thin blanket, was a baby. Elliot's breath caught in his throat. The child's face was pale, her tiny fists clenched tight as she shivered in the cold. For a moment he just stood there, staring. His mind raced. What was he supposed to do? He could barely take care of himself. But then the baby's cries softened, as if she sensed his presence. Her eyes, wide and innocent, locked onto his. Something inside Elliot shifted. He knelt down, his hands trembling as he reached for her. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly, his voice cracking. "I've got you." He picked her up, cradling her close to his chest. The baby let out a small sigh, as if she'd been waiting for him all along. Elliot wrapped his coat around her, shielding her from the cold. For the first time in years, he felt something other than emptiness. It was small, fragile, but it was there, a spark of purpose. He looked around the park. It was empty. The streets were silent. No one was coming for this child. "I can't just leave you here," he murmured, more to himself than to the baby. "But what do I do?" The baby nestled closer to him, her tiny hand gripping his finger. Elliot's heart ached. He didn't know how, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away. Elliot sat on the bench, the baby now quiet in his arms. Her warmth was a stark contrast to the cold night around them. As he looked down at her, his mind began to wander. Memories he had tried so hard to forget came rushing back. There was a time when Elliot Graves wasn't a man who slept on park benches. He was a musician, a guitarist with a talent that could make a room fall silent. He had a wife, Clara, whose laugh could light up even the darkest days. And Sophie, their little girl with her bright eyes and endless curiosity. They were his world. But that world shattered one rainy evening. Elliot had been driving. Clara and Sophie were in the back seat, singing along to the radio. He remembered the rain, the way the windshield wipers struggled to keep up, and then... the other car. It came out of nowhere. The crash was quick, but the aftermath felt like it lasted forever. When Elliot woke up in the hospital, they told him Clara and Sophie were gone. Just like that. His family, his reason for everything, was taken from him. Elliot's hands tighten around the baby as the memory fades. His eyes are wet, but he doesn't let the tears fall. The days that followed the accident were a blur. Elliot stopped playing music. He stopped everything. The grief was too much, and he turned to alcohol to numb the pain. One drink became 2, then 3, until he couldn't remember a day when he wasn't drowning in it. He lost his home, his job, his friends. Eventually, he lost himself. The baby stirs in his arms, bringing him back to the present. Elliot looks down at her, his heart heavy with doubt. "What am I supposed to do with you?" he whispered. He thought about taking her to the police, to a hospital, somewhere she'd be safe. But every time he tried to stand, the baby's grip on his finger tightened, as if she was begging him to stay. Just then a voice broke through the silence. "Excuse me, sir." Elliot looked up. A woman stood a few feet away, her coat pulled tightly around her. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. "I couldn't help but notice. Is everything okay?" she asked. Elliot hesitated. I found her, on the bench. I don't know what to do." The woman stepped closer, her expression softening. "My name's Mira. Let me help you." Mira Patel wasn't just a stranger. She worked at a nearby shelter and had seen her share of people in tough situations. She didn't ask too many questions, just guided Elliot and the baby to the shelter, where it was warm and safe. As they walked, Elliot couldn't help but feel a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Inside the shelter, Mira hands Elliot a blanket and a bottle of formula for the baby. "You did the right thing," Mira said gently. "Not everyone would have stopped to help." Elliot looked down at the baby, who was now sleeping peacefully. "I don't even know her name," he said quietly. Mira smiled. "Maybe you should give her one." Elliot thought for a moment. "Luna," he said finally. "Her name is Luna." As Elliot held Luna that night, he began to see a glimmer of something he thought he'd lost forever. A reason to keep going. The shelter was warm, but Elliot's mind was anything but calm. As he sat on the edge of a cot, Luna sleeping soundly beside him, the reality of his situation began to sink in. He was a homeless man with nothing to his name, no job, no money, no plan. And now, he had a baby to care for. Mira had been kind, offering him a place to stay for the night and even helping him feed Luna, but Elliot knew this was only a temporary solution. He couldn't stay at the shelter forever. The next morning, Mira found him pacing nervously in the common area, Luna cradled in his arms. "You look like a man with a lot on his mind," she said, handing him a cup of coffee. Elliot sighed. "I don't know how to do this, Mira. I can't even take care of myself. How am I supposed to take care of her?" Mira smiled gently. "You're already doing it. You kept her safe last night. That's a start." Her words were comforting, but Elliot couldn't shake the weight of his doubts. Over the next few days, he tried to piece together a plan. He needed food, diapers, and a way to earn money, but every step felt like climbing a mountain. Elliot stands outside a convenience store, holding Luna. He counts the few coins in his hand, realizing it's not enough for even a single bottle of formula. "We'll figure something out," he whispered to Luna, who blinked up at him with trusting eyes. Mira became his lifeline. She helped him apply for social services, guiding him through the paperwork and phone calls. She even introduced him to a local church that offered free meals and baby supplies. But the challenges kept coming. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Elliot found himself standing outside a liquor store. The neon sign buzzed in the darkness, calling to him like an old friend. The memory of that pain was still fresh. He hadn't had a drink in months, but the craving was there, gnawing at him. "Just one," he muttered to himself, stepping toward the door. But as he reached for the handle, Luna let out a soft coo from the sling wrapped around his chest. He looked down at her, her dark eyes staring up at him with pure innocence. "What am I doing?" he whispered, his voice breaking. He stepped back, his hands trembling. The craving didn't go away, but he walked away from the store, holding Luna close. The next day, Mira noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. "Rough night?" she asked. Elliot nodded. I almost messed up, Mira." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "But you didn't. That's what matters." Her words gave him strength, but the struggle was far from over. One afternoon, as Elliot was unpacking a bag of donated baby clothes, something fell out of the blanket Luna had been wrapped in that first night. It was a small piece of paper, folded neatly. He picked it up, his heart racing as he unfolded it. The note was written in delicate handwriting. "Please take care of her. Her name is Luna." Elliot stared at the words, his throat tightening. He didn't know who had written it or why they'd left Luna on that bench, but in that moment he made a promise, to himself and to her. "I'll take care of you, Luna," he said softly, his voice steady for the first time in years. "I don't know how, but I'll figure it out." Elliot's life began to change, slowly but surely. Thanks to Mira's connections, he landed a job as a janitor at a local elementary school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work. For the first time in years, he had a paycheck and a sense of purpose. With his first month's earnings, he rented a small, run-down apartment. It wasn't much, just a single room with a kitchenette and a bathroom that barely worked. But it was theirs. Elliot carries Luna over the threshold of the apartment, her tiny hands gripping his shirt. He sets her down on a blanket on the floor, looking around at the bare walls and cracked linoleum. "It's not much," he said, kneeling beside her. "But it's home." Luna giggled, her eyes sparkling as she reached for his face. That sound, her laughter, filled the room with a warmth Elliot hadn't felt in years. Over the next few months, Luna became the center of his world. He watched her grow, marveling at every milestone. Her first steps were wobbly but determined, and Elliot cheered her on like she'd just won a race. Luna takes her first steps, stumbling into Elliot's arms. He scoops her up, laughing. "That's my girl," he said, his voice full of pride. Then came her first word. "Dada," she said one evening, her tiny voice clear and confident. Elliot froze, his heart swelling. "Did you just say Dada?" Luna grinned, clapping her hands. "Dada!" He hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in a long time he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. But not everything was easy. One afternoon a social worker named Ms. Carter knocked on their door. She was polite but firm, explaining that she needed to evaluate Elliot's suitability as a guardian. "Mr. Graves," Ms. Carter said, her tone neutral, "you've made significant progress, but we need to ensure Luna is in a stable environment." Elliot's stomach churned. The thought of losing Luna was unbearable. "I'm doing everything I can," he said, his voice steady but pleading. "She's my daughter." Ms. Carter nodded, but her expression gave nothing away. That night Elliot couldn't sleep. He sat on the floor beside Luna's crib, watching her breathe. "I won't let them take you," he whispered. "I promise." The next day he reached out to Mira. "I need your help," he said, his voice cracking. "They're going to take her away." Mira didn't hesitate. "I'll testify for you," she said. "I'll tell them everything. How far you've come, how much you love her." At the hearing, Mira stood by Elliot's side. She spoke passionately about his transformation, his dedication, and the love he had for Luna. "Elliot Graves isn't the same man he was a year ago," she said. "He's worked tirelessly to provide for Luna. He's her father in every way that matters." The judge listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. When she finally spoke, her words brought Elliot to tears. "Mr. Graves," she said, "I'm granting you temporary custody of Luna. Continue to provide a stable environment, and we'll revisit the possibility of adoption in the future." Elliot's knees nearly gave out. He looked at Luna, who was sitting quietly in Mira's arms, and felt a wave of relief so strong it left him breathless. Elliot holds Luna close, his tears falling into her hair. Mira smiles, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. Elliot shook his head. "We did it." Life settled into a rhythm for Elliot and Luna, but it wasn't without its challenges. Luna was growing fast, her curiosity about the world blossoming with each passing day. She was a bright child, always asking questions and eager to learn. Luna, now 5 years old, sits at the kitchen table, coloring furiously with crayons. Elliot watches her, a tired but proud smile on his face. "Dada, look," she said, holding up her drawing. It was a picture of the two of them, standing under a rainbow. "That's amazing, Luna," Elliot said, ruffling her hair. "You're going to be an artist one day." But as much as he loved watching her grow, balancing work and parenting was becoming harder. His job as a janitor kept him busy, and finding time to spend with Luna was a constant struggle. One evening, as he tucked her into bed, Luna looked up at him with her big, curious eyes. "Dada," she said softly, "where's my mommy?" The question caught Elliot off guard. He hesitated, his heart pounding. "Your mommy couldn't take care of you," he said carefully, "but she loved you very much. And now you have me." Luna nodded, seemingly satisfied, but the question lingered in Elliot's mind. He knew it was only a matter of time before she asked more. The next day, as Elliot was cleaning the school gym, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Elliot Graves, is that you?" He turned to see a man in a leather jacket, his hair streaked with gray, but his smile as wide as ever. It was Jake, his old bandmate. "Jake," Elliot said, his voice tinged with disbelief, "what are you doing here?" Jake grinned. "I heard you were working here. Man, it's been years. How have you been?" Elliot shrugged. "I've been getting by." Jake's expression softened. "Listen, I'm putting the band back together. We've got a gig next month, and we need you. What do you say?" The offer was tempting. For a moment, Elliot could almost feel the weight of a guitar in his hands, the roar of the crowd in his ears. But then he thought of Luna. "I can't, Jake," he said finally. "I've got a daughter now. I can't just leave her." Jake nodded, though he looked disappointed. "I get it. But if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." As Jake walked away, Elliot felt a pang of regret, but he knew he'd made the right choice. A few weeks later, Luna's teacher, Miss Harper, called Elliot in for a meeting. "Luna is an exceptional child," Miss Harper said, her tone warm but serious. "She has a real talent for art. I'd like to recommend her for the gifted program." Elliot's heart swelled with pride, but it was quickly followed by worry. "That sounds great," he said, "but how much does it cost?" Miss Harper handed him a brochure. "There are fees for materials and field trips, but I truly believe it would be a wonderful opportunity for her." Elliot nodded, though his mind was racing. He didn't have the money, but he couldn't let Luna miss out on this. That night he picked up extra shifts at the school, cleaning classrooms late into the evening. He even took on a part-time job at a grocery store, stocking shelves after hours. Elliot comes home late, exhausted, to find Luna asleep on the couch, her crayons still in hand. He gently picks her up and carries her to bed. "I'll make it work," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "For you, I'll make it work." As Luna grew older, her curiosity about her past deepened. She was no longer the little girl who accepted Elliot's simple answers about her origins. Now, a teenager, she began to wonder about the woman who had given her life. One evening, while Elliot was at work, Luna sat at the computer in their small apartment. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed the words she'd been too afraid to say out loud. "How to find my biological parents." Luna's face is illuminated by the glow of the screen as she scrolls through search results, her expression a mix of hope and fear. She didn't tell Elliot about her search. Part of her felt guilty, as if she were betraying the man who had raised her, but another part needed to know. It didn't take long for Elliot to notice something was off. Luna had always been open with him, but lately she seemed distant. One night, as he was cleaning up after dinner, he found a printed email on the kitchen table. "Dear Luna, I've been searching for you for years. I'm your mother, Isabella. Please, let me explain." Elliot's hands trembled as he read the words. His heart sank. Elliot confronts Luna holding the email in his hand. His voice is calm but laced with hurt. "Luna, what is this?" he asked. Luna froze, her face turning red. I was just curious, Dada. I didn't mean to hurt you." Elliot sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You should have told me. We could have looked into this together." Luna's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared you'd be mad." Elliot pulled her into a hug. "I'm not mad. I don't want to lose you." "You could never lose me," Luna said firmly. "You're my dad." With Elliot's support, Luna reached out to Isabella. They arranged to meet at a small cafe, a neutral place where they could talk. Luna and Elliot sit at a table, waiting nervously. A woman in her late 30s, frail but smiling, approaches. She hesitates before sitting down. "Luna," Isabella said softly, her voice trembling, "you're even more beautiful than I imagined." Luna stared at her, unsure of what to say. Elliot placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Isabella took a deep breath. "I need you to know. I didn't want to leave you. I was young and scared. I had no money, no family to help me. I thought you'd have a better life without me." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. "I've regretted it every day since, but when I saw your picture online, I knew I had to reach out. Not to take you away from your father," she added quickly, glancing at Elliot, "but to tell you how sorry I am." Luna was silent for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took Isabella's hand. "I forgive you," she said quietly, "but Elliot is my dad. He's the one who's been there for me." Isabella nodded, her tears falling freely. "I understand, and I'm so grateful to him for giving you the life I couldn't." Elliot watches the exchange, his own eyes wet with tears. He feels a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and pride. After the meeting, Luna and Elliot walked home together in silence. Finally, Luna spoke. "Dada," she said, "thank you for supporting me. I know that wasn't easy for you." Elliot smiled, though his heart was heavy. "You're my daughter, Luna. I'll always support you no matter what." Years passed, and Luna grew into a remarkable young woman. Her talent for art had blossomed into a passion for architecture, and she worked tirelessly to build a career she could be proud of. Elliot watched her with a mix of awe and gratitude, marveling at the person she had become. One sunny afternoon, Luna drove Elliot to a quiet street on the outskirts of town. He had no idea where they were going, but Luna's excitement was contagious. Luna parks the car under a large oak tree and turns to Elliot with a smile. "Close your eyes," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. Elliot laughed. "What are you up to, Luna?" "Just trust me," she replied, grinning. Elliot closed his eyes, letting Luna guide him by the arm. After a few steps, she stopped. "Okay, open them." Elliot opened his eyes and gasped. In front of him stood a beautiful house, its design a perfect blend of modern and cozy. The front porch was lined with flowers, and large windows reflected the sunlight. "Luna," he said, his voice trembling, "what is this?" Luna beamed. "It's your new home, Dada. I designed it for you." Elliot was speechless. He walked up the path, his eyes taking in every detail. The warm brick, the wide windows, the carefully crafted front door. Inside the house, Elliot explores each room. The kitchen is spacious and bright, the living room cozy and inviting. Then he steps into a room that takes his breath away, a music room, complete with a guitar on a stand and a small recording setup. "Luna," he whispered, his voice breaking. "This is incredible." Luna smiled, tears in her eyes. "You gave up so much for me, Dada. This is my way of saying thank you." Elliot pulled her into a tight hug, his own tears falling freely. "You didn't have to do this, Luna. You've already given me everything." Later that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Elliot handed Luna a piece of paper. "I wrote something for you," he said, his voice soft. Luna unfolded the paper and read the lyrics to a song titled My Luna. It was a tribute to their journey, the struggles, the love, and the unbreakable bond they shared. Luna reads the lyrics, her eyes filling with tears. She looks up at Elliot, her voice trembling. "Dada, this is beautiful." Elliot smiled. "You're my greatest masterpiece, Luna." Just then, Luna reached into a bag and pulled out a framed portrait. It was a family picture, but not just of her and Elliot. In the corner was a small photo of Isabella, a reminder of where Luna had come from and the love that had shaped her life. Elliot stares at the portrait, his emotions overwhelming him. He looks at Luna, his voice barely a whisper. "You've made me so proud, Luna. Not just because of what you've accomplished, but because of the person you are." Luna leaned her head on his shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dada." For Elliot Graves, the journey had been long and difficult. But as he sat there with Luna in the home she had built for him, he realized something important. Sometimes, the greatest miracles come from the simplest acts of love. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Elliot and Luna sat side by side on the porch of their new home, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. Elliot leans back in his chair, his guitar resting against the wall nearby. Luna sits cross-legged, her sketchpad on her lap. They are both quiet, soaking in the peace of the moment. Elliot glanced at Luna, a soft smile on his face. "You know, I still can't believe this is real. This house, your success. It's like a dream." Luna looked up from her sketchpad, her eyes warm. "It's real, Dada, and you deserve it. You've always put me first. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Elliot chuckled, shaking his head. "You don't have to take care of me, Luna. Just having you here is enough." Luna reached over and squeezed his hand. "Well, you're stuck with me. Forever." They laughed, the sound mingling with the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. For a while they just sat there, watching the sky change colors as the sun set. Sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the one we're born into. For Elliot and Luna, love was the key that turned their lives around. What would you have done in Elliot's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more inspiring tales.